Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Currency U number 2. I'm your host, Dan, with Polar Currency, and we got our second host here, Andy, with Andy's Notes. He's also with Kearney Coin Center, Kearney, Nebraska. Andy, how are you this evening?
Fabulous. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing actually pretty good. It was fun chatting with you today. I appreciate the help on a really technical issue that because I'm a dork and want to know.
Okay.
But thank you for that. It greatly appreciated. So, Andy, we're going to start with a format. Trying to do a format when we get together. I don't know if it's going to work. Maybe people will think it's super boring, but we're going to try to basically run down, and I lost my list already. Isn't that great? But that's okay. We're going to basically talk about what's going on in the industry, if there's anything to talk about. If there's not, we're going to move on. Then we're going to highlight a note. And Andy, you want to talk about what we're going to try to highlight first going forward?
Probably kick it right off with the 1862 legal tender.
Legal tenders. So go after a large size type collection,
Yeah, it's kind
kind of go
of
down that road.
yeah, the $1 issue is kind of a crossover note between obsolete collectors and type collectors, and it's super common with or super popular with like the Civil War guys and the obsolete broken bank guys. And the historical importance of the note is just it's tremendous. So
But I think it's cool that we're going to continue, keep going down that road and talk about, hey, here's, kind of the ins and outs of collecting that single note and going, like the next one, we'll talk about the 1869 Rainbow $1 legal tender. And there's only 10 notes. There's only 10 large size notes for a type collection, and I am including the ace in there. And I think it's what I like about it is that I think it's all affordable. It's attainable. I mean, yes, the original Ace $1 is not the cheapest thing in the world, but it's not really a showstopper either. And you had said this that they're available in all grades. You can get super
yeah,
high grades, medium grades, low grades, they're available. So we're going to kind of go through that as part of it, and we'll get to that today. And then the last, the kind of the third segment, or that may or may not change, we're going to kind of like talk about maybe, sleeper notes. And we've got a couple notes that are one's not so much of a sleeper, one that I've certainly talked about before, but it's like, why is there a difference between the notes when they're probably on paper shouldn't be? And talk about
yeah.
why we should collect them. And they are small size notes, so it's always good to talk small size on something different. And we all tend to lean towards large size, which is great, but there's some really cool small size stories out there too. So, all right. So, Andy, you recovered from your influenza A, whatever.
Yeah.
You had the bug. You brought it back from Florida, gave it to your family. What a nice guy.
Have
And maybe you got it up here, took it down there.
I every year we go to Florida, we all come back sick.
That's awesome. No, it isn't. That's horrible. So you went to the fun. You were at the fun show with Kearney Coin Center, correct?
Correct.
So tell me how to go. How to go as a dealer.
I'm just shows like that for me is tough because um, I'm working out of pretty much a suitcase because we flew down instead of driving, and you are bombarded person after person after person. It seems like for the entire duration of the show. The only time I actually looked at anybody's inventory and bought stuff from people was in their hotel rooms, either before the show or after the show. So I didn't really make my rounds per se on the show floor, but I was definitely busy enough at my table.
Well, I mean, you said you fly. I mean, you're bringing inventory. I
Correct.
mean, I mean, I'm assuming the cases are rented. That's all part of the table.
Yeah.
That's there. You're not packing cases. I'm sure some guys do, but those are all there. You get the keys set up. I mean, how much can I ask? How much inventory you brought down?
We probably had 400 or 500 notes total
Okay.
for
That's
just
awesome.
currency, and then coin. We brought minimal coins. We mostly bought coins to take back. So
And you always hear that about dealers, and this is kind of the, you know, the shows are mainly for dealers to purchase from each other. That's true?
It's funny that one of the guys I probably spend the most money with is closer to home to me than the majority of the people I do business with. I do a lot of business with J&J Coin out of Sioux City, Iowa. So, Sioux City's only like 4.5, 5 hours from my doorstep. And I go to these shows and I probably spend the majority of my time with him.
So Andy, I mean, okay, let's say you're selling the whole show. I mean, you couldn't. I mean, you said it on your video the other night. I just had to pull my inventory. And what does that mean? I was scratching my head going, what does that really mean as a dealer?
I it's not that I'm selective about who can come and talk to me about notes, but I had to have my regular customers walk by like, hey, do you have any Illinois notes? Oh, yeah, here's four, and I would just pull them out. I guess by not having notes out, I'm cutting down the amount of the public per se that comes and just maybe looks, and I'm only dealing directly with the customers who know who I am, know where to find me, know I'm going to give them a good deal. Um, as far as sales went through the show, sales were right on par for what I thought they would be. Um, I probably bought exactly what I spent, maybe a little bit more, but we're working on a super secret deal right now. So
Hmm?
the stuff that I was buying was really nice, large size type, all in EPQ or with really good eye appeal. The type of note you would really cherish or collect if somebody just gave it to you, so to speak.
Wow. Well, I mean, it's the fun show, by far the biggest show that I've never been to it, but confirm that is, if the big shows, the five big shows, this is bigger than the second biggest show by far. That's true.
So the ANA, as far as public attendance, I kind of feel like maybe a smidge bigger. But as far as dealer attendance and just show vibe, I think the fun show's the best show.
And
Um,
the A&A is in Oklahoma City this year, I believe,
yeah, and
which
I'll
is
be in
kind of
Oklahoma.
cool. That's
Yeah,
cool
I'll be
for
in
that.
Oklahoma City for that. So
All right. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the A&A, I'll say it. If you want coins and support there, great. I just wish they'd separate and just quit pretending with banknotes, but I won't put you on the spot there. That's my opinion. Once again, these opinions do not represent Andy or the Kearney Coin Center whatsoever. Um, they're only mine. Yeah, I mean, I have not been to an A&A show, but you do hear it's a very nice show to attend. Speaking of like attending, I mean, that's one other thing you're hearing more and more, and I don't know if, I can't say it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you hear people attending and they're like, okay, I can't get off work Thursday, Friday, or if it's open Wednesday, I gotta come Saturday, and half the dealers are gone, packed up, and I'm sure they realize that there's always going to be an inventory problem, right? I mean, I get that. You're on the third day. Um, you're not going to have as much inventory as first day. That's just math.
so
But
it's wild at some of these shows. You'll see some of the notes and coins change hands 3 or 5 times on a show floor before it finally sticks, or somebody's like, they put it in their back and they don't. It's not for sale, sort of thing. But as far as the ANA goes, and I've been to pretty much every major show with the exception of Long Beach and the Whitman show in Baltimore, which are just two shows that are conflicting for us with other shows here stateside. Um, the ANA does such a great job with allowing the mint to come in and do their display, and they bring in some of the ultra rarities. So they'll bring in like the 1928 $1,000 gold note, or the uncut sheets of brown backs, or some. They actually get this stuff out and they display it for the people to come and view, and then they usually put one large coin collection out for viewing. The last few years, I think it's been the Tyrant collection, which is absolutely unbelievable to see some of these choice rarities, and that there's actual collectors out there willing to share their collections, and that draws such a huge crowd that they kind of overlook the dealers and don't really buy anything. So that's kind of where I'm going. The direction I'm going with that is it's not like the public attendance is great, but the public spending isn't sometimes. So
Ah, okay.
yeah,
Well, it's funny you brought up the rare stuff. I mean, it's like that's I just started a new series with Rare Note Spotlight, highlighting some very rare and expensive notes that I just think, that's okay. The hobby needs every form of collector, and the big notes get the
absolutely.
press, and they get the eyes, and they get the cut and the attention and the chatter. So, well, it was a good show. I'm glad it was a good show. I had a couple folks that were there. I have not heard back from them because they never call me. That means you, Gunny. Um, but with that said, it certainly is a show that I do want to get to and just take it all in. So that is cool. All right. Anything else that you'd want to say on the fun show?
A lot of like you brought up the point about people coming on Saturday, and it is kind of a disappointment because those shows start on like for dealers, they really start on Mondays.
Yeah.
So by Saturday, we're like, we're over it. We don't want to do it anymore. Friday afternoon, we're actually like starting to pack up and organize for, the trip home. So if you really do want to plan to attend one of these shows, just take a Thursday off. Just plan one Thursday and don't jump at the first thing that you see. If you're there to buy or just there to experience, just take it all in first because it truly is mind blowing how big these shows are and how much stuff is available. It's cool to see how all these people come together and everyone's in such a happy, buzzing mood. So
All right, next subject, keep her moving here, is we're going to get into the highlight notes. So let's talk about the Series 1862 $1 legal tender. First thought when you hear that, what comes into your head, Andy?
greenback,
Greenback.
true. That's
That's,
a term we all use today, and nobody understands why we call paper money greenbacks.
you know,
And
I heard that it derived first from the Union soldiers, by the way, with their pay, because they were paid in them. But, that's hearsay, anecdotal, but pretty obvious why they're greenbacks.
it replaced broken banknotes and obsoletes and spurious banks, and it was really a unification of our currency altogether as one nation under God with an oath and a promise to pay, so to speak. So
Faith in the country.
it really did, and I brought it up earlier. I was chatting with you about it. I said it's really a great crossover note for people who collect obsoletes and Civil War and large size types. So it appeals to like three or four different groups of collectors. So it's a very popular note.
Well, a couple facts on it. I mean, yes, everything you said, 100% true. First federally issued paper money, the circulating paper money. You can talk about the 1861 demand notes, but their purpose was not to circulate as currency, but they were
Correct.
that $1 bill was actually not the first one. They actually launched the five first.
Correct.
What's interesting about the one and the two for me, both of them, and it's like I encourage you to get both of them, but the one, it's that circular pattern at the bottom, and I'll throw this up on the screen. That one, two, and three. And on the $1 bill, the one is encircled. On the $2 bill, the two is encircled. And you brought up obsoletes. And at the bottom is three. They were obviously talking about issuing a $3 note. That had to have been heavy in the conversation. And that was a very popular denomination from obsolete land. I mean, that is actually
Mm-hmm.
that was, it is uncommon for us now because we're funny as a $3 bill, whatever. But it's an interesting pattern, interesting story. And that green that they used, that whole patent story behind it, the chemical, the guy, I guess it was an American that was in Canada and developed
Yeah.
this ink that couldn't get washed out of the notes to be, because they'd wash the notes just like they do checks, wash the notes, get rid of the ink, and then put the new design or the fake design back on. take a one and make it into a 10 for an example. But that green wouldn't wash out without destroying it. Well, that wasn't quite true. A couple years later, they did find, I can't remember what the chemical it was, but they could wash it out. But that one was patented as far a chromium or oxide, something I can't remember. But it's got a patent on it. I also think it's cool that that same color green is not only used on the back, it's used on the front, which is really not done, obviously, today. It became strictly the reverse color and only changed for what, gold certificates and the blackbacks, which were
Yep.
technically blue, I guess. They just oxidized so fast, they became black.
So really, the 1862 paper that was used is just slightly modified obsolete paper. It doesn't feel like any of the other paper that's used for large size type, because by 1869 they were already combating counterfeiting, something tremendous. So a lot of people, they don't quite understand the look of the early legal tender paper. So, and this was something I actually was telling you early on. I go, a lot of people undergrade 1862 series because the paper is different. The texture of it's different. The inking's different. They're basically their own breed of note. So it has all the qualifications and the creativity of an obsolete design, but with this newly enhanced ink and slightly modified paper to give it that that little bit of edge over an obsolete of its era. 1862, like I said, it's a whether you're collecting the 1, the 2, the 5, the 10, and the extremely scarce 20, they definitely have a look and a feel that's completely different than any other large size type issued by the United States. I will say to me, they're all Friedberg 16. They're readily available in grades from terrible to VF20. You do see quite a few of them that have little notations like minor edge tears or minor edge splits. That has to do with that type of paper. That paper oxidizes with time and it just gets brittle. With anything, it has to do with storage and proper care and things of that nature. It is what it is kind of situation.
I was just gonna say but it's amazing that the color really holds, even on the lower grades. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember what I've got. It's low though. You know me, but it still looks really good. I mean, I was surprised to learn that with especially the ones in the twos.
Yeah, so that ink that's on there, you have to remember that, like I brought up the term oxidation. So the ink is also with time is going to oxidize. So you're going to see in the back of the note, it's obvious green on the face of the note has obvious green. Sometimes you're going to see hints of blue, um, because blue and yellow make green. So it's not uncommon to see those notes have just a shimmer of blue in the green. And you can see it on I've seen it on almost every grade of note from poor all the way up to uncirculated. And it, like I said, it just has to do with its
How
time.
much? Yeah, time,
You
time
know,
and exposure.
the note's 160 years old right now.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, it is an historic note. I mean, that $1, it's first $1 note that federally issued. Again, for those federal government only issued coin up until that time for circulating currency. So it
Mhm.
was a really big deal. It was a fiat currency. You can talk all day long about fiat not being backed. I don't care. It's the faith of a nation and then moving forward. And if it wasn't for those legal tender notes, which technically under the legislation is called United States notes. That's why you get that dual name, but
Yep.
the nickname stuck from the back where it says this is legal tender and the obligation on that. But it is, and you got Salmon P. Chase, which the most ironic figure I think on whose portrait is on a note. I mean, the guy was Secretary of the Treasury. He's still alive when he's on the note, by the way.
Yep.
Him and Abraham Lincoln. There was a couple others that were alive, but I mean, this is the $1 note. This is a highly used, it's a workhorse. And there was no golden coin that's been hoarded, it's been used. The US Treasury is almost out of gold. They're going bankrupt. So was the Confederacy, by the way. Both costs were going crazy. They had no idea the war was going to blow up this quick. Everybody thought it would be the Battle of Bull Run, call it a day, and we'll all go back to our, antebellum South and our whatever we do in the North. Uh, but that Salmon P. Chase, I mean, it was his idea. He was the big drive behind that, starting with fractionals, trying to get away to get currency out there, to get commerce moving, realizing how important it was. So he pushed it, and then he had a deal. By the way, he was the governor of Ohio, was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1860, took his seat for only 2 days in 1861 because Lincoln convinced him to be the Secretary of the Treasury, just badgered him. Well, that wasn't a freebie for Mr. Lincoln. He had to keep a promise that if a Supreme Court justice position opened up, that he would nominate Salmon P. Chase to take it.
Yep.
And in early 1864, guess what? The Chief Justice opened up, so he got the post. Literally 4 years after the Civil War, the legal case came up stating that the federal currency legal tender was not constitutional. And Salmon P. Chase was one of the judges, and he wrote not the dissenting opinion. I can't think of it offhand, but he was wrote the I'm for it opinion. And I just find it highly ironic that as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, he's arguing with himself, 7 years later,
Yeah.
and he pushed for it to be done. And I'll also go, well, it was war. You got to do what you got to do. It was war. So incredibly interesting with Salmon P. Chase. He ran against Lincoln for president in 1860, not a big run. He was full of himself. There's a quote out there, and he was a religious man. He also had a very heavy hand in getting "In God We Trust" put on coins. So the guy was a busy guy, and it's an interesting figure. And I always get a kick that here's a guy alive on the $1 bill, and he's kind of taken precedent over Lincoln because you want that's why Washington's on the one. His face is out there more. So that's, I just kind of scratch my head at that, but that's all cool. So, what's the sweetheart grade, Andy? If I'm getting an 1862 $1 legal tender, I mean, what is the sweetheart grade? I mean, where I'm like, is it 30? Is it 35? Am I going to find those or 25? What is it?
So for that note,
Yeah.
there's a lot of VF25s out there that are super nice that have all the eye appeal of a VF30 or nicer that might only have a minor issue like a minor edge split. But if you're really looking for a problem free grade, VF30, and they're going to run you
Yeah.
probably right now $1,200 to $1,500, just kind of depending on if you like full margin top or bottom, or if you're really being picky about the kind of note you're buying. That particular note, the Freebridge 16s, I can tell you right now, in 7 years, I've never owned an XF. I can't ever see or remember seeing an XF available. I've had some really, really nice VF35s that came back PPQ that I thought were, and by my grading standards would have been XF40s all day. But that little bit of handling probably keeps them down to the 35 level. From there, it jumps up. There's a slew of AU58s. I mean, an
Uh,
absolute ton of AU58s out there in both 58 no Q and 58Q. And then there's a tremendous amount of 63s and 63Qs and 64s. They really just they don't pop up in 65 or higher. The problem with the 58Q and the 63 flat, they're both the same price. They're $2,200 to $2,500. So
because the survival rate was pretty decent on that note.
yeah, a lot of those notes came from bank hoards, or I use the term bank hoard, but it's really what it is. It's vault cash. Notes that as banks made money, they went by the wayside and they forgot about them. and the old bankers, you say, oh, it's just an old pile of notes, or those are a bunch of old rags back there, or they'd have different terms for them. Well, if you're an entry level collector and you want to pick up a nice note that has great eye appeal, BF20s are under $600. Well, I sold I think it was a fine 12 net, and it just had some minor tape repairs on the back on the edge splits. That note just came in. I put it in a piece of plastic, and it was literally on eBay for 12 hours at $250.
Wow.
The note
Yeah.
still had it still had nice eye appeal, sharp color. All the details were there. It had all four corners, so it's really, and I say this pretty regularly, just buy a note that has nice eye appeal.
Yeah.
You're never going to go wrong. Your collection is always going to retain over the course of time. Um,
Well,
Dan and I had this chat earlier
yeah,
about
I'm laughing about it. Yeah.
about uh, you know people think buying collectibles is like hitting a lottery ticket. Like, oh, in 10 years, this is going to be worth $10,000 more. That's not the case. We're just caretakers of these items for a short time, and then the next people come along and get to own them. So
I call it we're just renting them. I
yeah,
just buy rent when I get it. That's it. Um, but it is true. I mean, it is true. The notes were printed by two different bank companies that believed that the plates were engraved by National Banknote, but both National Banknote and American Banknote kind of cooked a deal up when things
yep,
were happening to make sure they both had contracts for that. And again, both names may be at the bottom. You might just have National Banknote, National Banknote. You might have one of each. I don't believe there's a variety that has just American Banknote, but I could be wrong on that too. That's one of those, you get into the A, B, C, D, E, F, G
yep,
things. But it's another interesting story. And then you've got Chittenden's signature, and of course you got Francis E. Spinner signature, and that's the first time, well, technically, the first time it appears on a $1 note, and it's just cool, 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 cool note. All right, so now next phase, getting into the next thing. So, everybody's always talking about, sleeper notes. I actually did a video on this note and the two notes that we're going to kind of compare, and that is the 1966 legal tender $100 legal tender note, United States note. What's interesting is that it was printed to get rid of United States notes, which, since 1878, something like 346 million or 322 million, I can't remember the number, had to be in circulation per law. And they were issued by the US Treasury, not the Federal Reserve System.
yep,
So the Treasury and gold certificates, by the way, also same with silver. They were all issued by the Treasury, not the Federal Reserve System. Treasury wanted to get out of by 1960s. All right, silver certificates are gone, gold certificates are long gone, and they still got these $2 and $5 notes, but they were only 1% of the currency circulating at them. They were a nuisance because of this law that could not be repealed. So they had an idea. Hey, in 1966, they're like, let's print a bunch of hundreds, and then we'll put them in a treasury vault and say that they're in circulation. All right. I mean, that was the game to beat, and then we'll slowly withdraw the ones and twos, which started happening in 1968. Interesting footnote on it: why it's 1966. That's when the process started. They weren't printed until 1968. When they did print them, by the way, there was no Secretary of the Treasury. It had been vacant for 2.5 years. That's why they went back to the Catherine O'Hanrahan and Fowler signature combination that was on. It was kind of like what happened in 2021 with that. There was no secretary or treasurer, I can't remember, for a couple of years. So they couldn't do it. So 2017's kept rolling, or 2017 A's. So what's interesting about it is that so few were printed. There's two FR numbers, technically three, and I'm not going to talk star notes, okay? Just going to toss that right out. 1.292 million. 1.292 million were printed. And that's an unbelievably low note. Well, it's certainly for coins, but it's really super low for currency. And Andy, I'm curious, the only thing I can think of that would be that low was like the 1933 $10 silver certificate. That was like 233,000 or something like that. Can
Yeah,
you think of
there's a couple other districts in the 1930s that have low printings. Um, just off the top of my head, I would say probably like $100 bills from Richmond or Minneapolis or Dallas. But in the grand scheme of things, by the time the 1960s rolled around, I mean, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but 1957 silver certs or something like it's something astronomical. So
massive?
when and those are $1 bills. So you're talking about 1.2 million $100 bills, and these just that's not a lot for the time frame.
But these notes, super cool. They are the last United States note, legal tender note printed. I mean, literally carrying on since the 1862 notes, right? I mean, they were all the same type. And it was also the first note to carry the new English version of the Treasury seal. People kind of think that's the 1969 series. It was actually this note had it before then because it was printed in 68. Anyways, the conversation is that I brought up to Andy and said, "Hey, I want to talk about this." This is a relatively inexpensive note compared to the 1928 gold certificate, the $100 1928 gold certificate, Friedberg number 2405. The Friedberg's on the 66s, and I am combining numbers. There was series 1966 and 1966A, but they printed 3.24 million gold certificates. Now, there's going to be a lot of asterisks coming up. And Andy, if I'm going to get a very fine 20 in a gold certificate, $100, what am I paying?
1,200 to $1,500.
If I want a very fine 20, if I can find one,
$160,
maybe, yeah.
$180.
I mean,
Yeah.
it is hard to find lower grades in the $100 legal tender because they weren't meant for very little got out into circulation. A lot of
So
them did sit in a vault.
here's it. So 1957 B silver certificates.
B, yeah.
This is just B. This is all blocks printed. Not this. We're not talking star notes. This is just 57B. 718 million notes.
And those were
Okay.
printed in the early 60s, correct?
They're printed basically in 1963.
Yeah, the last
Okay.
run.
So 63A, which is Joseph Barr and the Catherine
Yeah.
signature. So pretty much the same time period. This is one district, Chicago, 284 million $1 bills. So putting this legal tender into the perspective compared to like a dollar bill, this thing is less than 1% of the actual printings of all the other notes that are circulating at the time. This is a blurb, a true
Right.
speck of dust.
A literal.
What I mean, I know that people are watching this and they're like, oh, 1.2 million, that's a lot. No, when you look at actual physical note printings, those are printed the same year. So you had basically there's over a billion $1 bills, over a billion
Running
between
around.
between silver certs and Federal Reserve notes.
I mean, so you wonder why I walk in with a crumpled 1957B into your shop and you go, does it not work in the vending machine for you? And here's another buck. Um, so I mean, kind of the story. I mean, go back to the pricing. 1,200 bucks versus let's say 200 bucks just to make math easy. And that really is, I'm going to say it's not comparable grades. If we were to compare grades, it'd be higher and much higher pricing, but we'll stick there just to be simple.
So
So
the same year, $100 bill, Federal Reserve note
yeah, how
in New
many?
York, just New York, 12 million.
Wow.
So you're talking 12. It's like 12 to 1.
but there is a reason that that is so much money because even though, I mean, the kind of the moral of the story is you just can't look at print numbers. And when you see them, you're like, oh, that must be. And if you're aware that that's a lower number, and obviously it's roughly half, yeah, roughly half, 40% of the United States notes printed versus the gold certificates. But you got to remember, gold certificates came out in 1928, really, probably 1929. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed his executive order. I think it was 6102. It's illegal to hold gold, including gold certificates. Unless you were a coin collector, you got to keep your little gold coins, but us currency collectors got the shaft and gold certificates. Not that I have an opinion on that, Andy.
You
Yeah,
know, and
gold certificates were illegal to own. So, the survival rates become, they both have an issue with survival rates, making both notes, I think, even more important to add to your collection. The gold certificate was massive. I dug up a article from 1973 in at the Society of Paper Money Collectors Journal magazine, and at that time they had estimated 88% of all gold certificates from 1928 were gone, destroyed, turned in, whatever you want to call. And so that equates to, okay, if 3.2 million were printed, that equates to roughly 400,000 would even have a shot of surviving past like 1935. Um, so that's significantly less. Now, on the other side, with the legal tender, it was the same thing happening. So in this one, I couldn't find a number. Nobody had an estimate. Well, Littleton Coin had a little blurb, and yes, I went that deep in researching because that's how much I care. But they had a blurb that, and it was a real thing in 1994. The legally, the Treasury did not need to hold the notes anymore. They repealed that 1878 legislation and an act called the Rigel Improvement Act. It finally got repealed. And so they say that a lot of the notes were whatever was left in the Treasury was destroyed. We don't know what was left. I could not find any answer on what was left in the Treasury. So out of that 1.2 million, almost 1.3 million, a great deal got destroyed. But they weren't meant to circulate. A ton of them did get out. Don't know how or why. They shouldn't have been, but they did. So the remains of what was left of the printing are both of these notes are it's a lot less than what the numbers printed, a lot less.
yeah,
So you get different censuses. I tried to get a balance, like, well, can we get that? And I did find a website, by the way. It was an interesting website, hadn't been updated since what, September 2020, called 1928notes.com, the Series 1928 Census Project. Interesting website. It's not
yeah.
up to date, but it was actually a really good website. But like, okay, well, like, let's look at PMG. PMG, which provides great, their population report, really easy, with the two on the legal tender notes hundreds. They have graded 3,333. All right. They've graded of the gold certificates, they graded 1,156. Now, that's just a glimmer. It'll glean into the number difference, right? How much more I think that's out there that says this is why the 100 legal tender is cheaper. Heritage Auction, they have since 2002, they have sold 2,322. I recognize that a lot of those could be duplicate sales. I understand that. But Heritage Auction also for the gold certificate since 2002 only did 584. Track and Price, I had a buddy. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate your help on this. For the legal tender lists a population, and it's not really a population. They're just saying, hey, we have record of these auctions. And this is not a duplicated number. They throw out. This is a census number, not a auction number. So they had track of 7,273 100 legal tenders, and they only had for the FR 205 $100 gold certificate 1,346. So a full, that's like, what is that? 20% of, that. So that gives you a glean that, yeah, there's less. That's why the gold certificate's going to be $1,200. That's why the legal tender. But I still think the legal tender 100 is the best sleeper note small size out there as far as, bang for your buck. I mean, if there's going to be more collectors, there's going to be a lot less of those to buy. So, and they're
It,
more affordable.
it's such an interesting note because really for legal tender series, it's the first denomination of its kind since what, 1880?
Yeah, since the old large size, yeah.
Yeah. So here you have it's almost like an afterthought, like, hey, we should make $100 red seal. I'm sure somebody at the time was like, this is a bad idea.
Well, it was a workaround. They were skirting the law, is what they were doing.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of, I like that creative thinking because printing all those ones and twos for 1% of your currency populate, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the Treasury just wanted to get out finally, just we're done printing currency because again, that was their responsibility. And here they had these 12 quasi-independent banks out there literally printing printing money and responsible for it. They knew that. So,
If you were to put together like $100 large size typeset for small size, and you were just going to say, "Hey, um, I'm going to buy a 1928 numerical seal, and then I'm going to buy a
yeah.
28A light green seal, and then I'm going to buy a $2,800 gold certificate, and then I'm going to buy a 1934 series as my representation, and then you can't not do a 50E because the 50E was emergency. There's another story there, but if you stopped at 1966, the only note that we're really discussing that is kind of unobtainium is the $100 gold certificate. It's the one that's just kind of like, man, this is, and if you were doing like FRBNs and you're saying, hey, I'm going to put a 1929 set of $100 FRBNs together, those are still more obtainable and they have a way smaller printing. I mean, they printed something like 40,000 on one district.
Yeah.
That's diddly, but they're still more readily available than this $100 gold certificate.
Well, and it's funny because that's, Ontario 100. He loves talking about the difference between rare and scarce. The $100 gold certificate is rare, but it is not scarce. You can find them. They're out.
They're
I
out
mean,
there.
they're out there. You can buy them, but you're going to pay for them. And that's something, when you're looking for these notes, I mean, is there anything that as a dealer, Andy, that you would say, hey, be careful of this, or make sure it's graded, or I don't know, is there any advice you'd have on either one of these notes as a dealer to a buyer saying, yeah,
The $100 gold certificate, you're going to see a lot of them that have pinholes. They were used in bank to bank transactions, so a lot of them were stapled to documents or pinned to documents. The 1966 hundreds and 66A hundreds, they're plentiful in all grades. They don't really come in like XF45 to AU. I mean, they're out there, but there was a ton of low serial survivors from uncirculated packs. And when I say low serial, I'm saying like 3-4 digits.
mhm.
I do believe there is some 2-digit serials that are known, but as far as condition wise, the 1966 series note, whether you're just looking for a nice BF example, you should probably pay like $160 to $200 for a raw one, and a certified one you're probably going to pay $200 to $250 for a BF 30 or a 35 EPQ. But you can pretty much collect that note in whatever grade range or budget range you want. Now the $100 gold certificate, I've seen some like BGs and some fines sell for 600 to 650 with maybe a corner missing or some staining or just light issues. But if you really want a nice note in VF, it's $1,000 bill or more.
Yeah. I mean, my advice from the guy on the couch, I mean, one, if you're going to get the legal tender, you want that you want that paper to be as bright as possible, and some of these have what am I talking about, Andy? That the paper is toned a little bit.
So that paper is different than all other series of hundreds. Um, they reuse the stock for the 1963 twos. So that paper has
That's
kind
great.
of
That's a great tidbit. How did you not bring that up until now?
the paper has kind of a waxy feel to it. And I think, and this is just my presumption, that paper is like that to help the red from
Wait,
fading, or it's not very absorbent. And I think the reason they did that was to help prolong the life of the red.
okay.
57 silver certificates are also printed on a similar
The
paper.
same thing, but not the 63 $1.
No, though they're more of a cotton based, and
Huh,
I think that was because of durability, for durability and wear sake.
got it. Interesting. Great tidbit. Thank you. But yeah, that's for me as the guy on the couch going, you're getting that note because it's just so, it's like a foreign note. It's like just 100 with a red. I mean, it just pops. It's so different, so unique.
Yep.
But I mean, these are great notes to get at shows, get in person, because then you can hold them in hand. And so if you're in search of, I'd say try to get these notes at a show. They're
You know,
fun to go find.
this is my personal opinion, and I'm not hating on the gold certificates at all. I absolutely love gold certificates. But the yellow that they used on the 1928s is a tinge of yellow to where it conflicts with the whiteness of the paper. So sometimes for me, it's hard to make out the digits in the serial number. Like,
Hmm.
I know this is a gold certificate. I understand that it's yellow, but the paper color is bright and the yellow's bright and they like reflect off of one another. So for me, sometimes it kind of looks like a blurb. I'm like, oh, it's just, it is what it is, sort of thing. It's not like red on white or blue on white.
Right.
They picked this super shiny, flashy yellow and then this super bright white paper, and it's distracting for me personally.
The gold yellow color used on the gold certificates, was that the same exact color used on the World War II emergency silver certificates for the yellow seals?
No, I don't think it is.
I don't think so either. I don't
I
think
think the
that
North Africa is more like a
brighter yellow.
yeah, it's like a marigold, or like, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It's more yellow.
It's just fun hearing you say marigold because, any other flower
Mar-
names you want to throw
marigold.
out? All right. So that's kind of the story. Anything else to add, Mr. Professor?
Um, I was actually thinking. So when we were talking about kind of the paper, and I was thinking of 1963 was the first year for a $1 Federal Reserve note.
Mhm.
They never printed one prior to, so it was a brand new design, brand new paper setup, and I'm going to hit you with this little tidbit, and it's going to drive you absolutely crazy. But the first printings of the 1963 $1 Federal Reserve notes used silver certificate backplates.
So is it a mule?
It is a mule.
We are gonna have that conversation someday, and I keep dancing around it. I tell Andy, I go, no, no, don't tell me, don't tell me. I don't. We're gonna have it right outside in front of everybody. That's a great tidbit, though. That's a great tidbit. I mean,
Uh,
part of that FRN, by the way, they had to change legislation. They had to put in new laws to allow for a one and for the 1963 $1 FRN. And two was approved at that same time. They did not issue it, but it was approved with that legislation signed off by President John F. Kennedy. So that's a little tidbit on the $1 and $2 FRNs for when they
and
became
and I
legal.
believe the one is the only note that is protected by federal law to never change.
You had to say it. This is the bane of my existence, and it's not so much that it's like I hate the design. It's like it's kind of cool to see that hangout, that longevity. That's cool. What drives me crazy is why, folks. It was done because of the damn vending machine industry. They didn't want to update their stuff. Well, when's the last time you slid $1 in and you didn't use your credit card at the vending machine? And here we're stuck with an old ass tired. It's tired. I'm just saying it. All right. Well, that's all the time we have this evening. And once again, this is Currency U number 2. Mr. Andy, thank you as always for your knowledge and your great personality. Um,
You taught me something new. This whole thing about the 1928 gold certificates and the 1966 legal tenders, when you brought this up to me, and I'm like, what is he talking about? And you actually, I'm as a professional, I don't always catch printings. I don't look at it and go, oh, this is 40 years later, and it's one, basically 1/7 or whatever, whatever it is we figured out. But you taught me something new, and I'm ecstatic because I learned from you and you learned from me.
I learn a crap ton more, but I'll take it too. I mean, it's just fun. I look for the anomalies and the different things. That's what makes me tick.
Yeah,
Whether people find it interesting, I probably don't talk about collecting enough or the grading and the cost. That's not my gig, but that's I do. It's a part of our hobby. I'm trying to
yeah,
force myself to learn, and you're helping me do that. So, and it's a kick that you know both and enjoy both aspects or the multifaceted aspects of collecting paper money. So, well, that is it. Please, I urge you to check out Mr. Andy's notes on YouTube. He's cranking out some videos, and again, as always, I appreciate that Kearney Coin Center allows you to do that and come out and be a voice for the industry. It's appreciated. So thank you. Thanks for checking in. I appreciate it. We will both see you on the other side.